Hey, welcome in everybody to the Flagship Podcast, the latest episode with yours truly, Chip Brown of Horns247.com and the one and only Eric Henry of Horns247. And summer rolls on, but football season never ends, Eric. We've got a lot to get into. We'll talk a lot of football. We're also talking Directors' Cup for Texas, the fourth Directors' Cup win in the last 5 years, back-to-back for Texas. They won it in 2024 as well. Kudos to Chris Del Conte, because I don't think most Texas fans knew what the Directors' Cup was, Eric, before Del Conte took over in December of 2017 and started winning this thing in 21. How you doing?
Chip, I'm doing better. We were taping last week, which was the only, sore spot, only black mark when I thought was otherwise one of our better episodes. In fact, I was sick. So I was having to turn the camera off and, handle some business that I didn't want, the entire audience to see. But I feel much better now. Couldn't be doing better. For all of the fathers out there who are coming off of Father's Day. Hope Father's Day treated you well. Hope, Chip Brown, Hank South, the fathers of the Horns 24/7 crew had a excellent Father's Day. And yeah, Chip, just quickly piggybacking off of what you said there. Listen, you're right. I don't think many people in general knew what the
hold on. And
yes, sir.
Oh, I can't put the comment up on screen, but
I got it.
Chris Bennett is wishing you a happy belated birthday.
Appreciate it, CB.
Tell everybody when your birthday is.
June 15th. June 15th.
June 15th. Well, heck, happy birthday, Eric Henry.
I appreciate CB, the world's best Texas Longhorn, unpaid producer. I call him an intern at this point, but not CB. Much appreciated there. I call
him the world's greatest volunteer radio producer.
Volunteer radio producer, yes, sir. Back to Chris Del Conte and the Directors' Cup. Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying in my mind the job that Chris Del Conte has done. I've written about it a little bit in almost in the Insider. That's Chip's column, which comes out on Thursday. I wrote about it in 4 Downs. My thoughts on Chris Del Conte. I don't mean this as a slight. Like, Chris Del Conte is a shark, and I mean that in the best way possible. I think it takes, especially in today's ever-changing landscape of college athletics, it takes the type of athletic director who knows exactly what he wants to do, how he wants to do it, and executes that plan, right? I'm not going to turn this into the, Chris Del Conte segment, but I think, for all of the things he does for, Texas fans in terms of, being available and responsive, I think, just being that shark, that guy who, a Jim Schlossnagle, I don't care whatever, blowback is going to come from that. I'm going to go get my guy, because guess what? If we win, it's all worth it, right? I'm going to go get a Sean Miller, make that move, right? I don't care how it's perceived. Win, that's what matters, right? And I think in this college athletics landscape, that's worth gold. So it's no surprise that Chris Del Conte, has been able to turn that into Directors' Cup success.
Well, and the 2 national championships that Texas won in the 24-25 school year, men's swimming and diving under new first-year head coach Bob Bowman, hired by Chris Del Conte, after Bob Bowman won the national championship at Arizona State in the previous year. So that was, I think, a great example of what you just said, Eric. Being a shark, you go hire a national champion, like a reigning national championship coach, to come take over the program, obviously from the GOAT, Eddie Reese, who won 15 national championships. And then Bob Bowman comes in year 1, wins it. Now it helps to have a guy like Hubert Koch from Hungary, who won 3 individual national titles and a relay national title. But and Mike White, softball coach, national champion, hired by Chris Del Conte after White had made 5 trips to the Women's College World Series at Oregon and now has the trophy for Texas. And those points were absolutely essential, Eric, because this was the closest Directors' Cup on record. It took like a lot of crazy things, including Texas A&M's men's track and field team tying USC for the national championship to help Texas eke by with a 1.5 point margin to win the Directors' Cup. If Stanford's 5K runner had finished second instead of third, Stanford would have won the Directors' Cup. If A&M hadn't tied USC for the men's track and field, outdoor national championship, USC would have won the Directors' Cup. So it was a close call, but the Longhorns hold on to the Directors' Cup. Eric, we've got a lot of football to get into. You've been busy writing stories, and today we learned over at Horns247, shameless plug, that Arch Madness will indeed be coming to SEC Football Media Days in Atlanta next month. Not a shock that Arch Manning is going to be one of the 3 Texas players representing the Longhorns at SEC Media Days, but now everybody can prepare. And Eric, Chuck Dunlap at the SEC told me more than 1,200 credentialed media will be at this year's SEC Media Days. We've been around it. Arch, give me your take on how Arch is going to handle this, because as we know, BetMGM already has him as the Heisman Trophy frontrunner for 2025 at plus 600, ahead of LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, who's at plus 850. And then Cade Klubnik and Jeremiah Smith are at plus 1,000. Your thoughts?
Chip, it's first off, 1,200 people at SEC Media is just wild, right? I mean, you're talking to someone who spent 6 years covering Conference USA, in which you take that number and take away the 2 zeros, all right, as far as the amount of people who are at Media Day. So it's always just, I say that in jest, but, to kind of provide a serious point for listeners and viewers. I mean, Chip, you can't even compare what Big 12 Media Days was to SEC Media Days. I mean, it's apples and oranges. It is insane, right? And I mean that in the best of ways, in terms of just what the atmosphere is, right? In terms of how Arch is going to handle it, Chip, you're talking about a guy who was 18 years old, just turned 20, was 18 years old, took the stroll out, and this is the impression that was left on me, took that stroll out with his team at the turf on the Superdome, and then took a little spot on the bench, the visitor sideline bench, and all the media descended upon him. And to be able to sit there and handle that at 18 years old, A, it's impressive. B, it's not surprising considering, his last name is Manning, and we talk about all the things that come with that. I think one of the things that, is certainly well equipped is handling media, right? He has had spotlight on him from the moment he decided to make football his dream, right? And play at a high level. So I think Arch will be fine. Arch, even, to be honest with you, Chip, and maybe I'm speaking selfishly, and this probably, listen, when you're Arch Manning and the crush of not just media, but your everyday life is under the microscope, what I'm about to say is probably not realistic, right? Considering that he has to live in that microscope that he's asking Sean Miller, hey, can I get the key to Moody Center to go to hoop with my boys? So I can't do it at the rec, which I wish he could hoop at. I think Gregory Gymnasium is the rec for UT kids on campus. I wish he could do that, like any other college kid, but he can't. So what I'm about to say isn't fair and probably unrealistic. But selfishly speaking, Chip, I hope that Arch appreciates, the 25 or so faces that he's going to see on the regular in Austin compared to, the 100 or so people he's going to deal with at Media Day, right? Selfishly speaking, I hope that. I know that's just not realistic considering the microscope that he lives under on a day-to-day basis. But to answer your question, he's going to be fine. There's nothing that Arch Manning, won't be prepped for that he hasn't already been prepped for. The only curiosity, Chip, and I'll pass it back to you on this, and this is just my perspective. I think, we're still dealing with college athletes, right? And we're still dealing with student athletes. How much longer? Who knows? But for the time being, we're still dealing with student athletes. I think the SEC does a good job of not letting it turn into a circus. Because if you've ever seen Super Bowl Media Day, that can be a little bit of a circus-like atmosphere where you get questions that are completely off the beaten path and off the wall, right? And it's like, all right, maybe we should dial back some of the credentials, or even, I don't want to, get too far off base, but you've seen other sports leagues, the WNBA, for example, right, who they're trying to, draw attention and credential people, and sometimes the questions get a little left of center. The SEC does a great job not allowing that, right? So there's nothing, in my opinion, Chip, and I'm curious if you see it the same way, in terms of a question that Arch could be asked, that he does not have something in his arsenal to answer. Yeah,
and he's comfortable giving short answers when it's appropriate, and we'll see how he is with people just trying to get one question in after another, probably cutting him off. Nonetheless, it will be probably as much fun to watch it all unfold as it will be to try to get some questions into Arch Manning on Tuesday, July 15th, when Texas will take the podium at SEC Media Days. It'll be Auburn and Hugh Freeze, Georgia, Kirby Smart and company, Josh Heupel, Tennessee, and Texas on that day at SEC Football Media Days. I don't know, Eric, maybe it's more interesting that Arch Manning just spent time in St. Louis at Ryan Wingo's football camp, first ever youth football camp in St. Louis, along with Colin Simmons, Nick Brooks, DeAndre Moore Jr. was also there, but some pretty cool images coming back from that. A lot of people, talking about Arch in the hood in St. Louis. But I thought this was awesome stuff from Arch Manning with a receiver who they're going to need each other this season.
Yeah. Chip, real quick, I'm going to do a little bit of breaking news, and I'll then come to the Arch Manning, because I have thoughts on Arch Manning in St. Louis. Here are, as Chip wrote about, the women's basketball home and road opponents dropped 2 days ago. The men's basketball home and road opponents just dropped. So I'll just read these off to you super quick here. The home contest. I'm just reading the tweet from the Twitter account, so I don't have the dates or anything yet. But home contest will be Florida, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, OU, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Vandy. On the road will be Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, OU, Tennessee, and Texas A&M. So there you go. Those are the home and road opponents for 2025, 2026. I will say, Chip, selfishly speaking, thank goodness Texas is not heading to the dump that is the Pete Maravich Center. All right, that's my thought there. After going to the Pete Maravich Center last year, a lot of history. They're in need of a new building. There's a reason why Kim Mulkey's standing on everything for a new building. I digress. Chip, this is a substantive thought, and I'm not shading anyone who is taking, like CB notes, Arch in the hood in St. Louis, right? A lot of people had fun with that, with Arch there, with the local residents and whatnot. Ryan Wingo, of course, taking the list of Longhorns you mentioned there. This is a Chip, a point that I'm curious your thoughts on, and I'm actually going to write about this later this week, probably be out tomorrow. Steve Sarkisian spoke about Neil Brown working with Arch Manning just on developing as a leader, right? Chip, I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, all right? Nothing was going to – I know the novelty thing is, we got Arch Manning, the royal family of New Orleans coming to the hood, right? Which, for whatever it's worth, New Orleans ain't no joke depending on where you are, right? So it's not like Arch, came from, the middle of Wyoming. But from a substantive point, right, Chip, I think that means something, I don't think. I mean, I can't. I know it means something. I can't speak for the players. We haven't spoken to them. But you don't think that matters, that like Arch Manning is like, yo, where you guys from? I'm gone, right? Those things matter. And I'm not saying that Quinn Ewers wouldn't have done that or whoever else. However, just from a sheer culture, bonding, team building perspective, you don't think it means something to Ryan Wingo that his quarterback, who, again, let's just call, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, Chip, when I say grew up differently than being in the hood in St. Louis, that he's willing to say, yeah, I'm with y'all. Like that stuff matters in my mind. So that's the substantive point that I want to take away from this. And again, I'm not trying to give the kid a Nobel Peace Prize for this, but I do think just from a sheer bonding, team building perspective, he's willing to be like, yeah, where are you guys from? Like, we heard Quinn Ewers talk about this, right? About wanting to, learn about guys. And Michael Taff in the spring saying he's trying to expand his, boundaries, not just be around the Andrew Makubas and Jahdae Barons, but learn to other guys, where are you from? Where are your family? So on and so forth. Those things matter. So whether it is, I'll pass back to you on this, whether it's taking, Michael Taff or, I'm Spencer Shannon or Will Randall, those guys to dinner, or it's going to St. Louis and being with Ryan Wingo or DeAndre Moore or like those things matter to me. So that's a real substantive point that I took from this, Chip.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, any extra bonding that can occur, especially between quarterback and receivers, we know how absolutely important that relationship is, that they be on the same page, on the field, off the field, that chemistry, that bond. It's essential. I thought we saw some of that last year when Anthony Hill Jr. and David Benda went to Hawaii.
Great point. Yeah.
I know that sounds exotic, but Lianga Lafau had his football camp in Hawaii and basically said, if you guys can get there, I'll take care of you once you get there. Have places for you to stay, friends to stay with, whatever. And look how well the Texas defense and that linebacker core played last year. And this stuff is important. It's very important. And I think Arch Manning is incredibly perceptive. And so I'm with you. I mean, it's funny, the images coming out, because literally, Arch is the only white guy in any of these pictures. It's not just, he's in a community setting, and, he's out there, they're running in the streets, and it's, good imagery, but that stuff is important from a bonding perspective. And so, Ryan Wingo's a guy I think a lot of people feel like can lead this team in receiving. DeAndre Moore Jr. also, we mentioned, was at Ryan Wingo's camp. And of course, Emmett Mosley the fifth, coming in from Stanford, who I think is going to be a big time impact player for Texas. Arch is leading these guys this summer. He's the one that's got to make sure that everybody's on the same page. 4 new starters on the offensive line. It's a huge task. And I wrote earlier in the year that, Arch is going to have to do more with less. And it's not less talent. It's less established experience and cohesiveness. Quinn Ewers last 2 years, he kind of had the same starters on the offensive line for the most part. And electric receivers, there was some carryover, and he had Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell in 23, and then he had Isaiah Bond and Matt Golden in 24, but Gunnar Helm. So, it's going to be different for Arch, because he's having to get Jack Endries, the Cal transfer tight end, into the fold and get him on the right page. Emmett Mosley, the transfer from Stanford, who also came in June. He's got to build up the confidence of those 4 new starters on the offensive line. It's a lot, and it's huge. And so this was, I think, a significant moment. You're going to look back and say, okay, Look how Arch is building his bond with this team. And I know a lot of these guys who are ascending into the starting lineup, he's practiced with on the second team in practice. And that will pay dividends as well, Eric.
Yeah, I was going to say, Chip, real quick, before you pivot, let's, for anyone, again, who thinks that maybe we're overstating this, Chip is going to be better equipped to speak to this than I, because he obviously covered this team during the period in which time I'm going to reference. But when I spoke with Jordan Whittington at Big 12 Media, Sugar Bowl Media Days is when he said, Big 12 Media Days is when he said it. Sorry. Try to get the timeline right. But when I spoke with him there and asked him what was the difference between the team going into the 2023 season and prior, he said, I don't know any other way to say it. We really rock with each other, right? Chip, how many times did we hear going into the 23 season, guys are spending time with each other? It's not just we go to Moncrief, go to the facility, we all go our separate ways, right? This is indicative of it. So, Chip, I'll pass back to you because you're going to be more equipped to speak to what it was in the past. Let's not forget about that. For anyone who thinks that, we're making too much of, Arch making a quick trip to Ryan Wingo's camp, like that's the substance right there.
Yeah. And it's Wednesday, full disclosure. We always say when we're recording, June 18th. And Texas is in the midst of its Culture Wednesdays now, which started when the team got its summer workouts going at the beginning of this month. So these are the culture building, chemistry building, bonding moments. And I think any football player will tell you the team is built now. The team is built in the summer. And in those workouts where they're the only ones grinding and have to do it for each other when it's the hardest. And I think one of the hardest things to build in the age of NIL and the transfer portal is good team culture and chemistry and selflessness. And so I've given a lot of credit to Steve Sarkisian for, working at that. And I think his story is instrumental to the culture that's been built. Steve Sarkisian's story of redemption, falling down, disgrace, redemption, your way back up, being relentless. I think that is Sark talks about it all the time. You take on the personality of the head coach. Okay. What do we know about Sark? He was cruising along, self-inflicted wounds, got that olive branch from Nick Saban, and built his way back. And we've kind of seen that from his own football team at Texas, 2021, 6-game losing streak in some improbable ways to lose Kansas. And then, 2022, the 8-5 season, and then obviously the last 2 years, the college football playoffs. So again, kudos to Steve Sarkisian and his coaching staff and the support staff for building that, because I think it's a big reason why Texas has been able to hold on to players they've wanted to hold on to in the age of the transfer portal and attract top-end guys who, and not necessarily top-end guys, but guys who fit. Let's put it that way. Guys who fit the culture and come in and immediately make an impact, Eric.
Yeah, Chip, real quick, and I'll mention one point on Steve Sarkisian, one point that you made about the transfer portal. As you were making your final point, I just was thinking back to, my time covering Group of Fives. And the reason I'm referencing this specific time is because, especially at a Group of Five, right? Like, if you're the head coach, you're already a player at a Group of Five, right? I'm not doing this to shade that level, but where else are you going to go, right? You hit the portal, you go in FCS, you go in D2, right? So like back, a few years ago, right? It was very much my way or the highway. And I just remember, I'm not going to name a player, but I remember talking to some guys who went to different schools and talking about the lack of authenticity that they felt that they received from their head coach, right? But the point I made is, what are you going to do? You're like, I got to stick it out, because what am I doing? I'm going D2. I'm got my partial scholarship, maybe, right? Authenticity matters. And I think especially in today's college football, Chip, when players have these options, NIL, portal, all these things they could do. The thing that, in my mind, has a chance to set a head coach, doesn't have to be Steve Sarkisian specifically, because obviously Steve has a unique story. Not everyone is going to have Steve Sarkisian's story. It doesn't mean that you can't be authentic in your own way. You just have to be authentic. You just have to find that authenticity. And I referenced it last week when talking about the House settlement, saying that, hey, the days of Bobby Bowden saying, all right, you broke a rule or something, I need you to go run those stadium steps till, sundown, right? Those days are gone. You have to find a way to, you can't just be like, and Chip, you referenced it. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. Urban Meyer, ruled by fear, right? Tom Herman was a descendant of Urban Meyer. You got to do something different, right? You have to be able to build that authentic connection with your guys that will at least say, hey, what I have here is a reason to stay here. And just piggybacking really quick on Steve, obviously everyone knows what happened at SC, right? Is struggle with sobriety and working through that. But even just in research, Chip, something I try to do, and you know this, I haven't done this job forever, but for listeners, I try before every season to try to find any little links between, a Texas coach or a Texas player and maybe an assistant on an opponent or whatnot. Just something you try to get those story ideas. The last time Steve Sarkisian faced Matt Patricia was Steve's first year, if my memory serves me correct, as Atlanta's offensive coordinator, because it was the year after Kyle Shanahan, who was the offensive coordinator. We know what happened in the Super Bowl. Atlanta, of course, had a very prolific offense. Kyle Shanahan's final year, the offense dipped a little bit with Steve Sarkisian. And I'm not comparing his struggles at SC to what I'm going to reference here in Atlanta, but people forget, it wasn't like, he got the olive branch from Nick Saban and then the train went back. No, he got fired from Atlanta, right? Because the offense struggled. And it just was something that clicked because I'm doing the research of the last time Steve Sarkisian and Matt Patricia met. And Steve was, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, where they were writing articles saying, man, like, what's going on with Steve Sarkisian? What's going on with this offense, right? It was not a straight, direct path, and Atlanta ended up losing that game. It was 23-7, if memory serves me correct. The offense sputtered again. So I'm just making that point when you talk about Steve Sarkisian and his redemption story. It was like this. It wasn't right. Just, all right, he got the, the life raft from Nick Saban, and then it took off. So just super interesting, and a little tease of the storyline for August 30th.
There you go. Matt Patricia is
defensive coordinator at Ohio State.
Coordinator at Ohio State took over for Jim Schwartz, who left, wanted a contract renewal from Ohio State.
Jim Knowles.
Jim Knowles, sorry.
The Lions fan came out of you there.
Yeah, Jim Knowles wanted a contract renewal with Ohio State. They dragged their feet. He said, hey, Penn State, what do you think? James Franklin said, yeah, let's do it. So Matt Patricia, now the defensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes, who, of course, will face Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns in both teams' season opener, August 30th. Eric, you wrote about 8 players who've played under 200 snaps in their college careers who could become impact players in this upcoming season. We won't, go into all 8, but give me your highlight players in that category.
Yeah, I'll do one on offense, one on defense, right? On offense, Chip, Brandon Baker, going through this, I'm trying to ask myself, and again, I'm curious, Chip, your POV on this, what your feeling was, and I hope, audience, just stick with me here, what your feeling was on Cam Williams entering last year, right? I think the feeling amongst most fans, and I'll say myself, was feeling optimistic given you had seen Cam Williams start against Kansas State, right? Chip, if you take that start out of it, and again, I know that's asking a lot, but just stick with me here. You take that start out of it, Brandon Baker's played more snaps than Cam Williams in his career, right? So for whatever level of uncertainty you kind of are thinking about at right tackle, just try that on for size. And then remember, you have one of the nation's premier offensive line coaches, developers of talent, in Kyle Flood, that should give you a little reason for optimism to feel like, man, okay, we can do this. Brandon Baker, of course, was a high 4-star, low 5-star, depending on, if you want to use the composite metric or, 247's ranking at tackle coming out of California. So
out of modern day.
So just consider that when you're asking yourself, man, how do I feel about right tackle? And you feel maybe a little better because you've seen Trevor Gooseby. Brandon Baker's played more snaps than Cam Williams if you take away that one start. Of course, Christian Jones couldn't go with the ankle. On defense, Kobe Black, again, another one that people can forget because that game, the final score will read 27-24 Texas. Remember, Kobe Black had iced that thing away. I know Chip remembers it because he, I don't think Chip will mind me outing him here. You think he disagreed with that call in the press box. I was sitting next to him. The Vernon Broughton targeting call that brought that pick 6 back. Kobe Black had put that game away, picked off Diego Pavia, took it to the house, was going to ice that thing away. Of course, it gets overturned. And then, of course, Diego in classic Diego fashion. And listen, if you saw Diego this week, he's not lacking confidence, something that if you covered Diego back in CUSA, I mean, the guy went and, decided to excuse himself on the rivals practice field. So Diego's never, Chip, you don't know that story? You know that story, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Diego's never lacking confidence, but nevertheless,
his favorite player is Johnny Manziel, so that tells you a little something.
That tells you a little something, right? So, but no, Kobe Black had put that game away, and of course, Diego Pavia comes back and leads Vandy down the field, and it ends up being a much tighter final score. So, check it out. It's available at horns247.com. Those are the 2 players I'll highlight, one on offense, one on defense. But yeah, Chip, a lot of guys after this being a veteran-laden team the past 2 years. You had 23 players drafted the last 2 years combined, 12 and 11. Yeah. So you had a lot of veterans who left for the NFL and graduated the last 2 years. Now you've got a team that, again, it's inexperienced, young in some places, inexperienced in other places. And we're going to see how those guys come together.
Yeah. Steve Sarkisian said at SEC spring meetings, we're not young, we're inexperienced in some places, but these are guys for the most part who have been in the program waiting their turn, not waiting their turn, but grinding for their turn. Guys like Kobe Black and Brandon Baker. Now, Brandon Baker's not having to wait too long, considering he was a freshman last year and got 20 snaps in a couple different games against Colorado State, against Florida. But Brandon Baker's a guy they've been high on, great feet and high football IQ. So maybe not as many penalties from that right tackle position. And he's still battling Andre Kojo.
Yeah.
The coaches are high on Kojo as well. But you just mentioned Kyle Flood, and look at the guys who are going to be on that offensive line. You've got Cole Hudson, who 4-year player, Neto Umazulu, who's 4-year player, redshirt junior. You've got Trevor Gooseby, who's relatively young, but DJ Campbell, who's going into his 4th year. And 2 of those guys are going to be making Cole Hudson will be making his first career start at center. Neto Umazulu will be a starter now after toiling away behind the scenes for 3 years. So kudos to Kyle Flood. Texas has not had to go to the portal for an offensive lineman in the Steve Sarkisian era. And that's something they take pride in. That's something that they feel like you've got to develop those guys yourself. You've got to put them in your system, develop them the way you want them developed, so that by the time they get their opportunity, you'd love it if you got 3 or 4 offensive linemen who grow up together, which, these guys kind of have, even though they haven't been starters. So I think this is one of the biggest question marks I have about this team, but yet not really. You know what I mean? It's from the standpoint of Flood having the track record of developing guys, but they gotta experience it, Eric. They've got to they got to pass things off. They got to communicate. They got to,
yes.
when the line shifts and the defense, suddenly looks like they're going to bring the house. How do you handle it? So this will be a great test right out of the box against Ohio State.
No, I agree. So I'm glad you made that point about communication, because that goes so under the radar at times when people talk about offensive line play, right? That's a huge part of it. Again, bring in a first-time, full-time starter at quarterback, Arch Manning. That's why I think having Cole Hudson at center, which pretty much more or less appears to be the route it's going to go, is huge. A, you're bringing someone who has started. B, he's a veteran guy, right? In terms of being around the program. So I think that is a big thing. I also think, Chip, if there's a year, if any, in which you're going to need, and we've heard Steve Sarkisian talk about this a little bit, 11-man protection, it's going to be this year. It's going to be guys needing to get off the line, get into their routes, right? Have excellent route runners. You're going to need a tight end who, Jack Endries, which, Chip, are you hearing me? Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback there. I think we're good. Apologies for that delay. But Jack Endries, who, Chip, it's interesting. And, you and I both use Pro Football Focus a fair amount, and trying to give fans a bit of a deeper insight into certain metrics. Jack Endries was tied. I don't have the exact ranking of where he was tied. It wasn't great in terms of his blocking overall numbers. But the player he was tied with in terms of his blocking numbers, and I'll find that number again real quick before we finish this episode. I want to say it was something like the low 80s or 90th in the nation in terms of FBS tight ends, was tied with Gunnar Helm, someone who we consider to be a good blocker, right? So you're going to need good blocking from him. And last but not least, at the running back position, you feel like you have three guys really, who are solid enough in pass pro. CJ Baxter, part of the reason, Chip, if you remember, CJ won the starting job in 2023 over Jonathan Brooks was in part because they felt he was adept in pass pro. Contravian Wisner, he's not afraid to stick his nose in there, right, based on his special teams career. And, of course, Jarrett Gibson, right? So if there's any year that you're going to need all of those pieces to come together, it is this year, but especially on the offensive line in terms of communication and not having those breakdowns.
Yeah. Yeah. In my chat on Mondays, I do my, Ask Me Anything chat. Eric's, I think yours is today, right? So you've got, someone asked me about, how good is the offense going to be? And look, this defense is the proven product. Now, I know they're trying to fill some holes at defensive tackle. Looks like with the 5 defensive tackles they brought in through the transfer portal, they should be able to field a solid interior defensive line that has some depth. We gotta see it, obviously. But freshman All-American Murad Watson came in from Syracuse. You got Cole Brevard, who got raves during the spring with Texas, and then Alex January, another one of those players on your, list of 8 guys who've played less than 200 snaps who could be impact guys. And I absolutely agree with your assessment of Alex January. This defense is going to have to win the game probably at Ohio State. In the college football playoff semifinal, as bad as that last play of the first half was for the Texas defense, all going into retreat and giving up a 75-yard touchdown on a screen pass, they did hold Jeremiah Smith to 1 catch for 3 yards by putting Andrew Makuba over him whenever he lined up in the slot. I think this Texas defense, with its proven playmaking experience, the edge position and the secondary, is going to have to carry this team, not carry, but be the more consistent side of the ball until the offense can settle in. Now, if the offense comes out gangbusters against Ohio State, watch out. But I expect some, coughs and burps from the offense. Eric, how about you?
No, Chip, I do as well, because if you remember, the last 2 years, it's kind of been that way, right?
Right.
Not necessarily. You take a look at last year's season opener against Colorado State. It was better than certainly the Rice game, but they still had a couple hiccups here or there. And just traditionally, I mean, offense takes a little bit longer to get on the same page than defense. And I'm not denigrating defensive players, right? But defense, a little less thinking, a little more reacting. You don't want your defense players thinking out there too much, right? And certainly entering, now the 5th year of having Pete Kwiatkowski as the defensive coordinator, and you have guys like Michael Taft, Anthony Hill, let's run down the list here, Manny Muhammad, Leonga Lafau. I'm just thinking of guys, Ethan Burke. I'm just thinking of guys who've been with the program at least 2-3 years, and playing for 2-3 years. They'll be able to not think as much and go play, right? So defense, to your point, that should come together a little bit quicker. That should be able to ideally hit the ground running in Ohio Stadium on August 30. Offense, it just takes a little more time. It takes a little more reps, and it's been that way the past 2 years. So I would agree with you, Chip.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned why don't you run through the Texas basketball SEC opponents one more time before we move on to some transfer portal activity for Texas baseball and Texas softball?
Absolutely. I'll start this time with the away opponents. At Alabama, of course, that's a certainly a tough place to play, Coleman Coliseum. At Arkansas, Bud Walton Arena. We know Bud Walton Arena is certainly going to be hectic as well. You go to Bruce Pearl and Auburn. You go to Georgia, to Rupp Arena, Kentucky, which, of course, Texas did not visit last year. Kentucky came to Texas. They'll go to Missouri. Texas did not go to Mizzou last year, faced Dennis Gates and the Tigers. Go to, I always forget the name of OU's arena. Chip, you'll
Lloyd Noble
Center to face OU. Go to Tennessee, and of course go to Reed Arena to face Texas A&M. Coming to Moody Center, you will get the Gators. I mean, that certainly is a premier opponent, Chip. No need to explain why there. It's self-explanatory. You get Georgia coming to Austin. LSU, as I mentioned, thank goodness LSU comes to Austin. Again, hate to bang on Pete Maravich Center, but it's a lot to be desired. Ole Miss comes to Austin. Mississippi State comes to Moody Center. OU, of course, both home and road opponent. South Carolina comes to Austin. Texas A&M comes to Austin. And Vandy will come to Austin for Sean Miller in the first year. This photo here features both Tremont Mark and Kendall Weavers. Got a couple big-time returners, as well as Sean Miller as the feature for the Horns.
Yeah, and the Texas women will play LSU home and away. That will be their, one opponent that they play both in Austin and in Baton Rouge. Last year it was South Carolina. The Texas women will also have to go to South Carolina, where Vic Schaefer has yet to beat the Gamecocks. And they're going to play that SEC tournament in Greenville, South Carolina again this year. Texas was 35-4, and their 4 losses came against 2 teams last year. The overtime loss at Notre Dame, and then the 3 losses to South Carolina, including the meeting that those 2 teams had in the Final Four. So Vic Schaefer said at SEC spring meetings, great, I got South Carolina in year 1. I got LSU in year 2. I'll probably have both of them home and home in year 3. But we'll get the dates for all those games, obviously, at a little bit of a later time. We also we got some windows. We got some time windows, Eric, for football. They didn't do a great job of, that flex. When they say it could be a flex, it's like it could be at 2:30, 3:30, or 5 through 7 p.m. We do know Texas will play a road night game at Kentucky. that you can put in the books. And we know, obviously, that Texas will play Oklahoma at 2:30. They'll play Texas A&M at 6:30 on Black Friday this year. But we're still waiting. Like, the Georgia game is flex, which means it could be, 2:30, 3:30, or anywhere between 5 and 7. So we'll get some more. Obviously, we'll get those times, at a later date. Some of those might be 6-day window calls, which sucks for the fans. But we did get a little bit of intel. Okay. Softball. So the softball transfer portal closed on Monday. So Texas Tech, that program's been, adding transfers. I've got a story up on Horns247. It's a free story. Check it out. Texas was able to hold on to all of its returning starters, and they have 6 returning starting position players. Plus, they get Viviana Martinez back, the veteran shortstop who missed the entire 25 season with injury. So, Mike White, although I'm hearing they did land a commitment, I'm going to wait for that player to announce it themselves. But I'll just say someone who could play outfield and first base. And so, when you think about your returning Tegan Kavan and Citlali Gutierrez and Cambria Salmon in your pitching rotation, you're adding Hannah Wells, the national, Gatorade softball player of the year, who can both hit and pitch, and is the crown of a top recruiting class, along with JC Nichols, whose athleticism is off the charts. She won the long jump state championship in high school. She won 4 state championships in softball, went to the state semifinals in basketball. I mean, she's in a high softball IQ. She's the heir apparent, it appears, to Mia Scott at third base. So for Texas fans who are watching Tech load up on players from all over the place, all Americans from other schools, Texas feels really good about its roster. I think they are still looking for a left-handed pitcher as well. You can still sign players out of the portal, but for Texas, it's, they didn't lose any of their returning position players. And Eric, for baseball, it sure sounds like, from the way that the players are coming in on visits, number of shortstops, number of catchers this week, including Carson Tinney, the stud catcher from Notre Dame, that it looks like Max Ballou, Jalen Flores, and Rylan Galvan are all probably going to turn pro. So those are the positions to watch for Texas in the portal. They've got Josh Livingston signed. He's the first baseman from Wichita State. Looks like the replacement for Kimball Schuessler. But yeah, I'm hearing Carson Tinney, the catcher from Notre Dame, will be visiting this week. They've had Eric Becker, the shortstop from Virginia, in Chris Asiopian. I don't even know how to pronounce that name. But the shortstop from Maryland has been in to visit. So we will keep you posted. We've got a baseball portal transfer tracker over at Horns247. So just check in on that to get all the latest. Eric, are you ready for some take it or leave it?
I'm always ready for some take it or leave it, Chip.
Well, then let's go.
And this time you are serving first, so we'll go ahead and get the first one up.
Okay. Take it or leave it. Number 1. Eric, it'll be 10 deep around Arch Manning's podium at SEC Media Days. Take it or leave it.
Chip, really quick for answer, do you just want to explain for maybe those who are not, the media nuanced, what you mean by 10 deep?
Yes. So that means there will be 10 reporters standing, behind each other, So a row of 10 reporters all the way around Arch Manning's podium at SEC Media Days.
There you go. Yeah. And listen, I'm trying to think of any scrums, Texas scrums that have come close, even any SEC scrums that have come close last year. Quinn was not 10 deep, but Quinn was very deep. I cannot think of many other, to be honest with you. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier was deep. I was in the Nussmeier scrum. I cannot think of any others outside of, quite frankly, Arch Manning's at the Sugar Bowl, to be quite frank. Yeah. So go ahead, Jim.
Okay. No, go ahead, actually. I'll wait.
Oh, yeah, you can make it in your point. I'll just say I'm going to take it. Yeah. 1,200 media credentialed. Yes. And I will not be one of the 10 unless, we get there and decide that I need to be. I only say that not because I don't want to talk to Arch, but a lot of the questions that he's going to get are going to be questions that A, we've already have covered in Austin, or B, are not going to be super germane to, what we're trying to do. So unless I get the tap, that'll be a Chip Brown will come in from the pen there. So, but I'm going to take it, Chip. What's his view?
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to take this. And here's the thing about Arch Manning. Because of Peyton Manning's affiliation with Tennessee, with Eli Manning's affiliation with Ole Miss, you're going to have all those reporters in there trying to, create some kind of angle for their own purposes, their own sites and stories. So he provides a lot of antennas, for his SEC, for the SEC media, period.
And then the LSU folks, New Orleans angle. So there's that too.
Right. So this guy, he checks all the boxes. This is going to be Arch Madness at its finest. All right. Take it or leave it. Number 2.
Before I address that, CB asked if we have real estate with how often we've been to Atlanta. CB, I might need to invest in some real estate with how often we've been there. Of course, the SEC championship, it's not moving. I do have a favorite establishment, Magic City, for the wings. Might have to get Chip Brown there one day. Wait, his lovely wife listens to this podcast, so maybe we won't. But I digress. Take it or leave it, number 2, before I get my man in trouble. The most likely Texas single season record to be broken in 2025 is Arch Manning throwing 34 touchdowns. Colt McCoy, of course, has that record set in 2008. Take it or leave it, Chip.
Yeah, this is, if Texas is going to have the kind of season that it wants to have, clearly they're going for it, and they're seen as a national title contender, even after losing 10 key contributors on offense alone from last year. You know what? I'm going to take this. Now, I'm probably not scanning all of the other records. I did say I think Jack Endries has a chance to break Hunter Helms' records from last year. The single season record for receptions, 60, and receiving yards, 736 for a Texas tight end. But if Arch Manning stays healthy, I think this record is going down too, Eric. So, you know what? I'll take it. What say you?
I will take it. Just saw James Cox, who was watching us. Appreciate you watching, James. I'm going to take it. In our roundtable, this is the record I took. And listen, there are some factors working against Arch. One, if you know Steve Sarkisian, he's not the guy who's going to let his quarterback throw 7 touchdowns in a game that's been well decided in the second quarter. That's not what he does. A, for the way he views the game, and B, because it's counterintuitive for what he's trying to do. If he's trying to get James Simon or Christian Clark or Jarrett Gibson some touches because he wants them to be available just in case something happens, or he wants to get some different offensive linemen in the rotation, right? Or quite frankly, just wants to get Trey Owens or Matthew Caldwell sometime, right? So that way it's a little counterintuitive, but look at it this way. Even if Arch stays healthy, I do have Texas playing for a national championship, which means they'll play at least 16 games. If he throws 2 a game, that at least gets him at 32, right? So if he has, a game where you break out and you throw maybe 4 against, a Sam Houston or a San Jose State, that can help pad the stats a little bit, I think it's going down. So I am taking it, Chip.
Yeah. All right. Take it or leave it. Number 3, as we wrap up the 24-25 college athletics year. Eric, the best football performance for Texas in 2024 was Jahdae Barron. Take it or leave it.
Chip, I'm going to take it. And I know this is probably a sore spot for Horns fans. Jahdae Barron against Georgia in the regular season was one of the best games I've seen, right? He single-handedly was keeping Texas in that game. Of course, Dalen Everett, had 2 picks and had an outstanding game. Dalen Everett, Georgia corner, had an outstanding game of his own. But Jahdae Barron was single-handedly, when it felt like Texas couldn't get anything going offensively, Jahdae Barron was single-handedly keeping Texas in that game. So I didn't ask if you were talking about single season performance or just single game, but for both, my answer is Jahdae Barron. So I will take it, Chip.
Yeah. I'm going to leave this and I'm going to go with Anthony Hill, because I felt like Anthony Hill could have and absolutely should have won the Butkus Award last year based on all the guy did a little bit of everything from a test perspective, a tackles for loss perspective, sacks perspective. My God, against OU alone, where he had 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and was just a tackling machine. He had the interceptions. He would have had a pick. There wasn't a block in the back from my man Trey Moore against UTSA, but I look at Anthony Hill being the glue guy and the energy last year from the middle linebacker position. 8 sacks, 16.5 tackles for loss, 113 tackles. He had an interception. He had 4 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. And look, there were stellar performances for Texas football last year. Calvin Banks winning the, Outland and Lombardi Award, for crying out loud. Jahdae Barron winning the Thorpe. Quinn Ewers playing, really well, obviously. But to me, Anthony Hill, he could have won maybe not the Nagurski, but I thought he should have won the Butkus. He wasn't even a finalist, Eric. I think he has a chance to be the defensive player of the year this year in college football. So I'll go with Anthony Hill on that. Any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, listen, I'm not mad at that choice of A Hill. Again, A Hill had a great season, but I think far and I shouldn't say far and away. I took it back. I shouldn't say far and away, but I do believe that Jahdae Barron had a better year.
Yeah, Jahdae Barron, 5 interceptions, 3 of them against Georgia. It's not bad. All right, kids, thank you so much for joining in the fun here on the Flagship Podcast. We appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to the Horns247 YouTube channel. Helps us grow. Feel free to give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to us. Whatever podcast platform you listen to us on. And until next time, we will see you over at Horns247, where it is crazy with recruiting coverage. You name it. Football season never ends. We'll see you over at Horns247.com. For Eric Henry, I'm Chip Brown. Stay safe and keep